Welcome to the Wildflowers Reunion Podcast. My name is Karen Irvin.
I'm Hannah Bone Spruce.
My name is Simi Sahu.
I'm Dawn Hausman.
And we are four women from different cultures and different countries, all consecrated by the Catholic Church as virgins living in the world. Join us as we share how we live this ancient vocation in our modern world. All right, ladies, so we're back again. And as I was reflecting on the last podcast, I mean, it was our first pancake, so it wasn't that bad. But I realized like we didn't really get into the beauty of the day, so we kind of talked about our vocation stories, which is super awesome. But how is it that we navigate actually living in the world in the everyday? So why don't we start with like the blessings? Like, what's the blessing of being consecrated as a virgin, living in the world every day? I don't know, Hannah, I feel like we need to start with you because you're across the pond, so you have something amazing to say.
Well, I don't know. I'm up before all of you because I'm like 6 hours or 5 hours ahead. But anyway, so yeah, what are the blessings of the day? So each of us, we have I suppose, a different prayer commitment each day. There are some things that are in common. So obviously, daily mass would be common for all of us. Praying the liturgy of the hours would also be common for all of us. I think many of us also try to have a daily holy hour. So for me, I think that hour of adoration, I sometimes feel like I just can't live my life without that. I cannot live my life. So I often do that at the end of the day. I work for a ministry and I work remotely from home. So that hour at the end of the day is just that moment where I just go and allow myself to fall into Jesus's arms and just to be there, just to rest in his presence, allow him just to fill me up again, fill me up from everything that I've poured out during the day, and just to be in conversation with him, just to allow him to speak into the different things that have happened that day. I think, at the end of the day, many of us, the normal thing would be to spend time with your spouse, to talk with them, to rest with them. And so, yeah, I'd say that's one of the blessings of my day. What about you, Simi?
For me, it's also prayer is just so central. And I feel like as you're praying through the liturgy of the hours, going for mass every day, the liturgical season just really carries so much of our interior life. That's certainly a big part of it. I think for me, one of the things I enjoy so much is the fact that we're in the world, but we fully belong to Jesus. And we're also doing it out of the love that Christ has for the world. So I feel like sometimes, people hear a lot about, don't be worldly, which we shouldn't be worldly. But in another sense of the word, when it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So for me, one of the joys is those conversations that sometimes randomly pop up where it just makes people really wonder about Christ and also wonder about the goodness and beauty of the world that God created. So I remember one time just having a random conversation on the airplane with a guy who's just like, so you're married to Jesus is what you're telling me? And it was after like 30 minutes of talking. And I was just like, yes, that the ring on the finger. Yes, that's who it's for. And then you could just tell the cognitive dissonance of, is she crazy? She kind of seems normal. Then wait, is Jesus real? Like, which one, what is going on? So I guess like in a slightly impish way, I just enjoy sometimes just the funny moments that happen, but it often leads to something deeper of the Lord loving the world and the people that inhabit the world, and that we get to say, hi, Jesus loves you so very much. So that going out into the world and holding people in our hearts in ordinary and surprising ways would be my favorite. Dawn, what do you think?
The joy that I want to emphasize is the spiritual motherhood with people in the world, various people, and kind of sometimes being surprised by that, who God wants in our lives in certain seasons to mother. And for me right now, it's a lot of women in discernment of vocations and definitely, we have like a woman's household of discernment out here in our part of the state of Michigan, and just getting to mentor them, walk with them, and also being surprised of the other various people who come into my life who I'm called to mother. But then the beauty of, I mean, this might sound mean, but not taking them home. I mean, that I get to come home to rest in the Lord, to be rejuvenated in the spousal love with him at the end of my day. But the as Karen says, the radical life of here, there, and everywhere, like the missionary spirit that I love about this vocation is like a great joy to me. Sometimes I can be mentoring someone, helping someone through some troubles, even some friends who are married. Sometimes I'm traveling to Colorado to do a presentation for a ministry I'm a part of that's even outside of my normal daily life and work. So just the spontaneity of living a missionary life and a spiritual motherhood that is just, it very much fills me. It very much, gets me excited to wake up in the morning and be like, what's the mission of the day, Lord? And doesn't always go the same way. There's not like a 9 to 5 every day in the way my life is going right now. So it's very missionary-like, and I love that. How about you, Karen?
Yeah, I appreciate you just use the word missionary, because I hate that. not that you appreciate it. What I mean is I've never identified with the term missionary, because I always assume it means like you go to this far off place with no water, no electricity, and you're ministering entirely out of your element, is kind of how I've always seen that word. And yet that is, I think, sometimes the reality of the day. It is really blessed, because I do see the Lord's grace at work. So I'm a elementary school principal, which means that every day is going to be a little bit different. And I've got 470 students right now that I'm responsible for. So I definitely understand spiritual motherhood. But then I've got another, 50 staff members that I also am responsible for. So my time's not my own. So I'm always amazed at how the Lord equips in new and different ways to just manage the task that's in front of me, and to try and do it with grace and prayer. Every time I meet with anybody in my office, I always start and I begin with prayer. And honestly, when I first began, in this assignment at this school, I actually did a double take on that. Like, Karen, you're praying too much. This isn't normal for a principal to pray this much. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, you're consecrated as a bride of Christ. So who actually cares? This is you. You do pray that much. And I was praying with a mom the other day, and she actually started to cry, as soon as I opened up the meeting in prayer, and thanked me for that. And then when I closed again, but I used a Catholic prayer that I knew she'd know. And so she prayed with me, and she just looked at me and smiled. And she said, I just don't do that enough. And I'm really grateful, for that. And I thought, wow, the Lord gives me that opportunity in ways that I did not even anticipate. And he does it every day. He surprises in different ways with people who he puts in my path. And I'm trying to cultivate that interior spirit to hear from the Lord, like where to pour my energy in. Because I think sometimes, and maybe you guys can connect with this too, you have a to-do list for your day. Like I have a task list, and I actually have to remind myself that there's the human task list, and then there's the spiritual task list. Like, God's going to inspire me with different ways today and put different people in my path. And it doesn't matter what I think I have to get done. It matters what the Spirit's revealing in my day. And that's hard, that's hard for me to do, but I try and remind myself of that. And, that for me is where my holy hour becomes so important. It's just what you said, Hannah. Like, I hit the end of a day and I feel like a rag doll a little bit. Like, Lord, I'm really really tired. I don't think I can have another conversation. And resting with the Lord is literally that. where I'm just resting on the heart of Jesus with like, I gave it all I got. I'm sorry where I failed. I need you to make up for that. And then I need you just to pour into me. But how beautiful, to know that that's the relationship I'm in, that the Lord's going to equip and show up when I go out in the missionary field, and the field's going to look different every day.
I love what you're saying, Karen. So good. And I love that distinction between, the task list and then the Holy Spirit list, and just every morning to be able to, we're training ourselves, aren't we? Like, no, not one of us is perfect at doing this. And, but every morning, Jesus, what's going to please you today? Because I know I've got my plan for today, but you have, what's on your heart for today? And I often think of Our Lady. I think she has assignments for us during the day as well that we might not be expecting. So I think, there's a thing about laying down our lives where there's this kind of radical, how can I just be available? How can I just be available to everything that Jesus wants to do today? And, I don't have a human husband and children to look after, so I can be completely available to the Lord and what he wants, and he's jealous for us. Like that's why he's chosen us. He wants us to be our brides, his brides in that way. So all of us are working in some kind of church ministry role in some way, and it looks very different for each one of us. I work for a Catholic ministry in parish renewal. So we work with parishes all around the world. I'm in this global team, like speaking with different people all across the world every day. And then working so much with priests as well, and bishops. And I think that's one of the huge blessings of my life, just being able to be so closely ministering to priests, coaching priests, building those friendships, and just knowing what they're going through in the very kind of secular context in which they're leading parishes, and just being there for them. And I think as consecrated women, we're there in a very special and particular way.
I love, Karen, what you said about some of the tension that we experience. So that's definitely a common thread as well. And I like to think of it as the tension that already exists between the world going its own way and God loving and calling the world to himself, and the world really being made for God in the first place. And it's almost like our bodies and our hearts and our inner thoughts are a place that tension can play out during the day. And I think when I think about my friendship with Hannah, and one of the first things that we connected deeply on was this whole aspect of being in the world. And I think for me, sometimes when I speak about it, I say it's as important as it is for a religious sister to be in the convent and for a monk to be in a monastery. Like, that's how seriously I want to take, with God's help, living in the world and being with the people who are placed in my life. So for me, my particular life has led me to working with a lot of young people. I work for a Catholic ministry called Amoris Christi here in Delray Beach, Florida, and we serve middle schoolers, high schoolers. We have a residential program called School of Nazareth, so we have about 23 undergraduate students living full-time where I work, where I get to teach classes, just walk with them. Sometimes we're just doing dishes together, that sort of thing. And I also get to run a young adult faith formation program called Anointed and Sent, where young adults who are in different seasons of their life, discerning big decisions, learn contemplative prayer. They learn about what it means to be baptized, not just as a baby, but what does it mean to live in your baptismal identity. So teaching some of those classes, coordinating the program, a little bit of spiritual advisement. So just that place of being able to see God touching people's hearts, and people learning how to pray and finding their God-given dignity and place, and waking up to that great call that Vatican II really wanted lay people to wake up to. So getting to see all of that, and then also just using some old business skills of, event management, some of the communications that go through for our organization. So it looks like many different things, but there's certainly, those pressure points, which are quite precious in their own way. And like Dawn was mentioning earlier, it's just beautiful to have time and space built into our vocation where we have that privilege of bringing it into an exam and asking the Lord how He sees it and how He would like me to come back into relationship, how He would like me to come back into work. So that's a little bit of what I do. And I also get to live around a beautiful Christian community. My local parish is 3 minutes away from me. Lots of good neighbors that I've been close friends with for some time. So it's also kind of an open house where people are dropping in, meals are being made, teas are being drank on the porch. So another part of my ordinary life that I really enjoy is just that hospitality. I was also thinking about, I think it's been 3 years. So my second year, I just became awake to, wow, like I will not be having children for Christmas and gifts and all that. I knew that, but it was just the more practical reality of it. And as I prayed with that tension, I realized that part of the gift that I have to offer to my neighbors and my community is the silence of my home and the Lord's presence there. So I intentionally started just offering and letting local families and some of the families in our parish know, hey, if you need a place to just come with your family to just come and pray and maybe have a little snack or something like that, I'd love to have you over. So I guess hospitality and having people in my home is also another important part of my life. And I want to know a little more about Dawn, because when I think about someone who's an amazing hostess, I think of Dawn Hausman. So Dawn, would you share a little bit?
I do love to be a home of hospitality over here. And, you know, as I am currently living alone in my house, I do have the Blessed Sacrament, thanks to my bishop, who's allowed us in this diocese to have the Blessed Sacrament in our homes if we have a room set apart as a chapel. So I'm not alone. Jesus is in the home with me. But I do love that currently I don't have anybody living with me, and it really does make for space to be a welcome home for many. Sometimes it's for like a spiritual direction moment. Sometimes it's for a friend who just needs to come over and chat about something, or sometimes it's for gathering some consecrated virgin friends or something over for mass and dinner, various things. Yeah, and in my work for me right now in the Diocese of Lansing, Michigan, I'm a director of vocations, consecrated vocations. So a lot of times I've been helping in that ministry of helping a young lady especially walk into discernment of consecrated virginity, religious life, discerning marriage, of course, too. As a vocation director, I'm also coordinator of young adult ministry. And so we just hosted a gala for singles, young adult singles who, you know, came together to dance, but also came together to meet each other and potentially start dating. So I love to help Catholic singles out in that manner. But I, of course, do a bunch of other things for young adults besides that, such as pilgrimages and retreats. Retreat work is part of my job at this point of ministry. But yeah, definitely working for the church is a beautiful gift. And so, Simi, like you mentioned about being in the world, sometimes I have to intentionally think, man, I go to the grocery store so much. Lord, help me be attentive to like a God moment in the grocery store of being able to talk to somebody, or on a plane and flying somewhere for something, like that I'm attentive to the world of which I live, not just the circle of Catholic life that I live in as being in ministry so much. I personally too find it important to really ask the Lord how he wants me to be in the world, but not of it, and share this vocation, share who he is, our beloved Jesus. And yeah, praying intentionally for the salvation of the world is also a part of our job, is a part of the work as a consecrated virgin, right? Is what the bishop has asked us when he handed us the Liturgy of the Hours. And he said, you know, pray with the church, for the salvation of the world. That's part of our task.
I feel like you're bringing up a really important point. And the word I'm thinking of is balance, you know, because what I think makes the vocation so unique in one sense is that we are living in the world, you know, as if we're immersed in it, and yet we're not, because we're also immersed in the work of heaven, and it's easy for me to look at a religious sister, and long for that solitude of walking out of the world, into a community life, or into that rhythm of community life, and I get that I'm not in it, so I could entirely just be speaking, out of turn without knowing what it's actually like. But you know what I mean? To try and cultivate that balance where our heart is aligned to what God's asking, that we are, in fact, in that relationship with Jesus and able to hear from him, speak to him, move with him, and yet at the same time meet these demands of ministry. Because I mean, you just listed like 3 or 4 different things, and I know you're always running, right? And each of us are in different capacities, because people have access to us. It's not like I can look at my own community and say, guys, I've got communal prayer at 5, and then it's technology off and we're all in bed by 9. Like, that's not my life, that's not my vocation. So how is it that you guys maintain that balance? Like, how do you figure out when to turn off ministry and just lean into the Lord?
Karen, you're naming something that is, I think, a challenge, like it's such a challenge at the heart of our vocation, because, essentially we're contemplatives, like we're called to be contemplatives. I think there's a reality when you're contemplative, you're holding lots of the pain of the world in a kind of mysterious way. Like, I don't think you can even really understand how that works sometimes. But when you do spend that time with the Lord, he shares the burdens with you, and in a particular way. And you're right. In fact, Simi and I have just been kind of reflecting on this a little bit. The fact that you don't have the built-in, beginning times and end times to your day through like community prayer, or through like, oh, we're going to have dinner now, community. And I think that is one of the challenges, definitely, of consecrated virginity. And also, there's no easy answers to it either. I would say that, like, that, just being very honest with this, you can do your best to build in structure, but that you do feel the weight of those things sometimes. And also the other challenge I would experience at times is there are a few of us, and I feel like one of the treasures I've discovered in the 5 years since being consecrated is you 3 as dear friends, and I just but yeah, we live very far away from each other, and I feel like if we lived closer, there's a sense in which friends can, we can share that load together, we can share more. So just being very honest, like, that is definitely one of the poverties of our life. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, every single vocation has its poverties. Every single life has its poverties. We Jesus is calling us to enter into the poverty of the world, and we can carry that with him. But yeah, you experience that in the day-to-day.
I was also thinking, as you were speaking, Hannah, just the deeper thread of knowing our vocations, not just through what we've received in prayer and the reality of the consecration, the reality of the graces that we all experience, but I was thinking of recently how, married people grew up seeing many married couples, both the good parts, the difficult parts, but you just know so many different kinds of families, different ways that people, live family life. And you kind of, oh, this family is closer to what I'd want to live. Maybe those are not aspects I'd want to continue, or those sort of things. Or even for priests, priests will very often speak about that older priest, and then this priest who's my age, and this priest who's in the middle, and the presbyterate of the diocese, or the bond that they have when they go to different places. So a lot of vocations come so deeply built in with the community, not just the one that you live with, but that you see others who are like you, and you learn so much. So I think part of the poverty is that being able to see others, to know more and understand more about myself, but also in the larger life of the church, even though our vocation is the most ancient form of consecration. It's from, the first few centuries of the church, goes way back. But it's almost like because of the 1,000 years or so where women weren't living this vocation in the world, it's almost like our family has forgotten our little vocation, and obviously not intentionally. It's not personal, but it's I think of it as John chapter 1, where it says he came to his own home, and his own home knew him not. So I think sometimes for me, in the world is almost easier, because it's like, okay, like, you don't know about the Lord. He's real. He's here. He loves us, and I get to be his bride. But sometimes even the hiddenness within the church, because it's been 1,000 years since we were around and there's so few of us, that hiddenness, and trying to understand how to live this vocation faithfully in a way that's a blessing for the whole family of the church, is important. And to loop back to Karen's question earlier about how that balance happens, I think for me, I've been thinking a lot about how what are the places in my life where I'm reminded of who I am naturally. So one part of that, like all of you mentioned in different ways, the friendships with other consecrated virgins. So I make a point of being close with those who are close by. There's also consecrated virgins in nearby dioceses here, which I'm blessed to have as friends as well. But a monthly day of reflection has been just such a huge grace for me, because I would not be able to wait a whole year, and a daily holy hour is beautiful, but things just collect over time. So just to have that day blocked off with the Lord, and 3-4 holy hours, some rest, maybe a long walk somewhere. I live by the beach, going with the Lord to just enjoy a long phone call with a friend who knows me deeply. One of my friends who know me deeply. An annual retreat really helps a lot. The liturgy of the hours naturally remind me. So for me, I think the memory of our vocation is so important and restful, and rejuvenating. But I think the lack of the lived memory for almost 1,000 years or more, I feel that challenge within me. And I don't want to introduce people to myself as a consecrated virgin. I matter to the Lord, but I don't need my name to be known, but I wish my vocation was known a little more. So maybe that might be one of the challenges that I sometimes come across. Yeah.
I was just going to say that hiddenness, that you just mentioned, like, so powerful, so beautiful. And I think sometimes I don't know if I want to say like take it for granted, but we forget the mystery of it. The mystery of the vocation is the hiddenness, and part of it is because we blend in kind of to the world, even though our heart doesn't. I was just reading the document Ecclesiae Imago Sponsae, which is what the church kind of gave us as an anchor for this vocation back in 2018. But it says that in the mystical marriage, that we have with the Lord deepens and enlarges our sharing in his mind, and he conforms us to desire as he loves. That we actually desire to love the way that Christ loves, that we share in his mind, to what you were saying earlier, Hannah. And I think that's part of the hiddenness, because we're walking around the world as if we're normal, quote unquote, and whatever normal is anymore. I have no idea. But interiorly, we have this other life with the Lord that's happening, grace upon grace within us. And we're trying to navigate that and figure out what is the way to balance. And I love that you said that it's not enough just to have an annual retreat. Like, I agree with that. Like, I keep telling myself, Karen, you've got to get control over your calendar. You have got to set aside one day that you call the bride's day, and when people try and ask you to do something that day, you're like, no, I'm committed. Because we have to at some point acknowledge we need that. And I shouldn't have to justify it. And yet I feel like I do to myself sometimes. Like, I'm trying to remind myself, like, oh, wait, no, I'm supposed to be living in this vocation where I'm a bride of Christ, even though I'm in the midst of, the noise of the world. But we have to almost fight for that.
I think there's like telltale signs when we kind of hit the wall or not hit the wall, but like, I feel like my superpower, I had this idea of, oh, if I'm a bride of Christ, he's just going to give me a lot of grace to be like a super minister in the church, doing all these things here and there, super social worker, whatever, the path is. And to me, like the Lord's shown me, actually, I'm going to take away the experience of you thinking that you are able to be like superwoman here. And I'm going to have you depend on me more. Like I sense the level of, I feel more dependent on the Lord, and he almost forces me to need more silence and solitude, more prayer when I see like little telltale things of I'm getting ornery, I'm getting just very tired in the ministry, or caring too much about all the others around me and what they're thinking, and I'm just being overly sensitive to that. And I just have these like little signs that remind me, oh man, time to go back to prayer, because, and not that I stop praying. It's just sometimes you need extra prayer. Sometimes we don't get enough of the very natural human things of life. Like you need to be going on walks. You need to be making meals for yourself at night, and enjoying some extra silence and solitude with the Lord. And sometimes for me, if I have, 5 nights of the week booked with something in the evening after work, I know that's like a bad thing. I try to like stagger out, okay, I have a couple things in the next couple nights, so that third night, I'm not going to have anything. And so I've like learned myself a little bit in what the Lord shows me as just a pattern of when I'm going to need extra time with him. He's just really gave me sensitivity. And I think we all probably have that when we know, all right, time to have that night free to cook a meal and go on a nice long walk, and have that Saturday of rest with the Lord or something. It's just so beautiful that he reminds us of that. Just, you need to be fully human, walking with me in the life and the spirit. But you can't do that without having proper times of rest and rejuvenation and friendships, and just what really a normal balanced life should look like. But of course, extra prayer time than the average person probably has.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely given a lot of good food for thought. I know we all, carry this idea of balance into every day. So this is not the end of this conversation, but it's going to be the end of this podcast. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you too for sharing just a part of our journey together. We'd like for this to continue to be an interactive conversation. So if you have questions about the vocation, please email them to wildflowerreunion@gmail.com, and we'll include them in upcoming podcasts. Until then, may Jesus be the anchor of your soul.